Hello everyone. It's great to spend some time with you talking about security. I'm Samuel Arroyo, Senior Salesforce Product Manager at Provar. In this session, we'll be looking at how security and DevOps can deliver the most secure software. And I like to do that by talking a bit about myself and sharing my journey into information security. I started my Salesforce journey as a developer back in 2012. And shortly after, I started hiring, mentoring, and managing other developers, joining the consultancy I was working at. In 2018, I was up for a challenge, so I took the role of CTO, wanting to have a wider impact in the company as well as to our customers. Around that time, in Europe, all companies were thinking about was GDPR and making sure that they handled data properly so that they didn't get a hefty fine. As we were trying to engage with bigger companies, we started receiving security questionnaires to fill and send back to the procurement teams. Because many of the questions had to do with technology, and I had technology in my title, all these questionnaires found their way into my inbox. Security questionnaires, for those that haven't had the joy of filling them in, are spreadsheets with hundreds of questions, sometimes distributed amongst a handful of sheets. Each company has their own questionnaire, and they're usually quite strict, so you cannot just provide your own template that has all the answers. No, you have to go and actually fill in each one of them individually. I remember filling the first one with expectation because it meant that we could go and win a big opportunity. Not long after, I received another one and another one and another one. Soon, that initial interest turned into frustration. However, I was getting worried about our answers because they were showing that our security standards were not good enough. Something I realized was that on some questionnaires, if you had an ISO 27001 certificate, you didn't have to answer most of the questions. So I did some basic research and decided that actually, we needed to start taking security more seriously. And we could use the ISO certification as the way to achieve it. So I went to my boss and I told him that we needed to do this, that our customers were getting more conscious about data protection, more conscious about security, and we were not up to their standards, which could make us lose deals. He and the rest of the management team agreed that we should do it, so they gave me the task to get it done. So the first thing I did was look for quick wins, asking myself, what are those processes that we could make more secure with the least amount of effort? After all of those were done, I started looking deeper into what was needed for the certification and realized that this was going to take a long time that I didn't have as a CTO, so I kind of left it aside. It wasn't until 1 year after I started that I finally recognized we needed help if we wanted to move from good to great and finally achieve the certification. So we hired an external consultant to help us with the documentation and to keep us on track. After the first audit, I began looking for people in the company, people who could help me have everything ready for the second and final audit, as well as to take over my responsibilities so I could go back to just doing CTO stuff after finishing the project. I managed to find two fantastic colleagues, and together we set up and created the IT team. Thankfully, after a few months, we had the second audit and achieved the desired certification. Of course, things were still in need of improvement, but that's one of the reasons I liked about this certification, is that it expects incremental improvements to happen between those regular audits. So in reality, the IT team's work is never completely done. So to recap, let's quickly run through some of the principles that you can use to transform your DevOps processes to better integrate with your security needs. The first one, I believe, is that you need to set a goal. So right now, you probably are able to assess how security is embedded into your processes. And you need to picture how you want it to be in the future. After that, it's important that you get leadership to buy into your project. You can communicate the needs, urgency, risks, and expected outcomes to try and get their support. Next, I think it's important to empower all employees. Don't do it as I did at the beginning. Don't do it alone. Communicate the importance of security to the company and get other people to join in into your vision and your strategy. The fourth principle is to generate those short-term wins. If you're able to demonstrate the benefits of integrating security into your DevOps processes soon into the project, you will be able to gain momentum and energy to do the rest of the tasks. And finally, once you get some gains, it's important to consolidate those and to produce more change. So I recommend that you acknowledge what you achieved, make sure that those changes stay in place, don't lose ground, and work to continuously improve your security. If you're interested in learning more about change management, I like to recommend the book Leading Change by John P. Cotter, where you will be able to find more information about these principles. Now that we've looked at the principles that can help you along the way, let's talk about how security can be embedded into our practices from beginning to end. First, I want to acknowledge that these scenarios may not work for everyone. Every company is different, have different resources, and need to approach security from their own perspective. Some companies may have a dedicated security team, whereas others only have developers who also happen to wear the security hat. Some companies will have well-defined practices, whereas others rely more on common sense. Still, I hope that everyone will be able to find something useful to take away. So let's start. Here are some questions that I believe can help you consider the security implications when planning your project. For example, what are the specific security requirements? So, who can access the systems? Do they need multi-factor authentication? For how long can they access the systems? If we're talking about communications between systems, what is the minimum level of security required there? Another question is about data. How are you going to handle the data? Can employees manipulate data in their laptops, or do they need to use a virtual machine or a VPN? How do you make sure that they delete the local data once they no longer need it? Another aspect is about risks. So what are the risks in that project? Not just from a classic project management perspective, where you think about possible delays or dependencies you may have, and that may constitute a risk, but also from a security point of view. So you may start to think about what's the likelihood and the impact of those security risks, and what could be the mitigation approach, what could be even a possible solution for those risks. Next is the security postures. What are the established security postures in the company or even in the project? Maybe you're working under a different set of rules because of the industry or the customer you're working on. How does your company make sure that employees know the rules? Do you do a quick reminder at the beginning of the project? Or maybe you do some regular training? Or maybe is it just a one-off online course? Every company has different approaches to this. Another thing to consider is the security review cadence. That means how often will security be reviewed in the project? And that includes reviewing the risks and making sure that everyone in the project is adhering to the agreed postures. And finally, let's think about the roles and responsibilities that have to do with security. Is there a dedicated person or a team that will take care of security? Have they been involved or briefed about this? Is anyone going to wear the security hat in the project? I think all of these are interesting questions and very important questions to start to consider during the planning and analysis phase. Once we move into the design phase, things start taking a clearer shape, and we need to think about security in a more detailed level. The CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, can help us think about the security implications of every solution that we design. Confidentiality focuses on the access to information. Integrity makes sure that users are shown information that is correct. And availability helps us consider how we're going to let users access resources in a timely and reliable way. Personally, all of the data breaches that I've seen involved a failure to consider one of these three aspects. So I think it's quite important to be familiar with Salesforce's sharing architecture. On this famous inverse pyramid, we can see all the different ways in which you can change and define the sharing settings in your org. So it's very important to make sure that they are set up properly. Moving on to the implementation phase, Salesforce developers in particular have access to a range of utilities that help ensure their solutions adhere to the org's security settings. So let's go through some of those. In terms of access, developers can make sure that they enforce sharing rules with keywords like with sharing when they define their classes. They can also enforce object and field permissions. They have access to methods that allow them to understand if something is updatable, creatable, accessible, or even deletable. When they're querying the database, they can make sure that they only retrieve things that the user should have access to with the clause with security enforced. And if they already are manipulating data, they can make sure that they can remove anything that the user shouldn't have access to by using strip inaccessible. And finally, they can make sure that users only have access to those methods or those classes based on their user profile or their permission set. Other than that, I think it's also worth checking for vulnerabilities. And this can be cross-site scripting, unescaped output, cross-site request forgery, or even SOQL injection. The Salesforce platform also provides two different frameworks to ensure that Aura and Lightning Web components are more secure. And those are Lightning Locker, which we already know, and Lightning Web Security, which is in beta at the moment. Testing is the phase where we make sure that all the security rules are being followed and whatever solutions we're working on are up to the standards that we defined at the beginning. There are different approaches to testing Salesforce solutions, and each one of them focuses on something that the others can't. So let's look at them. The first one is unit testing. Apex code, flows, and processes should be tested using Apex test units. And I don't mean just achieving a particular percentage of code coverage. I mean that the developers need to make sure that they're testing those business processes. It's not about covering code, it's about testing business processes. And they should also check how their code behaves when an unprivileged user tries to run it. Another aspect is code scanning, which is quite useful to find common issues in the code. These issues can be related to best practices, code style, design patterns, documentation, performance, and also security. And these tools can often be run while developers are writing their code or when they submit their changes to the repositories. So they're able to receive feedback about their code much sooner in the process. And here I've highlighted three tools like PMD, Apex, we have Checkmarks or Clayton, and there are other tools as well that can help you scan your code. Another category is access review. As I mentioned before, making sure that users have the right level of access is crucial. So using tools that monitor and alert of unwanted sharing settings can help prevent data breaches and leaks. There are third-party apps like AppOmni, Netscope, or DigitSec that can help you with that. Finally, functional testing tools help us test end-to-end processes from the user's perspective. Testing what the user can actually do from the user interface can unveil bugs and security issues that other tools cannot find. And as an example, we have Provar and also Selenium. Finally, during the deployment phase, we may have security checks in place to review and approve changes, also taking into account operational risks like downtime or knowing what the rollback options are. During the maintenance phase, it's important to continue testing and monitoring the results to ensure that our Salesforce orgs are kept secure and to prevent security vulnerabilities or data breaches. And that's it. I know that you may be feeling a bit overwhelmed with everything that we've covered, but let's summarize the main takeaways. Those takeaways that I really believe will help you integrate security into your DevOps processes. The first one, I believe that you should approach it as a change management exercise. If you don't know where to start, I recommend that you look at established change management frameworks to help structure your approach. Again, I really recommend the book Leading Change by John P. Cotter. It's a fantastic book and it's very easy to read. The second takeaway is that security is a mindset. It's not just a series of tasks that need to be done. It's crucial that the teams involved understand and appreciate the need for strong security postures. Regular communication, training, and education in general can help our team members embrace security into their daily activities. On a more practical level, it's important to shift left on security. And by this, I mean to start considering what is the security impact on everything that we do, from planning to execution to deployment. Because security testing is not just something that happens before going live. The last takeaway is really that the sooner things can get tested, the better. And the most efficient way of doing that is by using automation. My recommendation is that you embed into your CI/CD pipeline at least one security check per category, if possible. That is unit testing, code scanning, access reviews, and functional testing. That way you will be able to catch security issues and bugs sooner and prevent issues in production and also data breaches. This is the end of the session. I really appreciate if you managed to stay until the end, and I hope that at least I've made you think about security and how it can be improved in your own organization. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out via LinkedIn or Twitter. Thank you very much, and don't forget to contact Provar if you're interested in test automation.